All must, most should, some might, plan lessons late into the night.
Hello and welcome back to another At the Chalkface. And today the controversial heading we've titled this session up with is Differentiation is Dead. Oh, Dave, you come up with the titles for these ones. I tell you, you're getting into this marketing clickbait stuff, aren't you? But obviously, we're going to get into the nuances there. Are we saying differentiation as a broader concept has no place in the classroom? No, we're not, but it's certainly evolved. It's certainly changed. And what maybe we were taught as classic differentiation when we were learning, we've moved on substantially from there. So you're probably going to be annoyed at me here, Dave. I'm going to go straight in with like our headline line. For those people who are too long didn't read, the line, and then we'll get into it, is no, differentiation isn't dead. But what we would say, if you want one takeaway, you want to be off this video in 60 seconds, is we don't now differentiate down, we scaffold up. Right, there's a lot to unpack there.
So
episode done.
You need some differentiation. You have so much to learn about this YouTube space, my friend. Look, you don't want people off the video in the first 60 seconds. That's not how
I
it
also
works.
know when you don't get to the point until 30 minutes in, people aren't watching. Right. Want to know more? Let's get into it. Right. Dave, unpack that a little bit for me, or maybe give us a bit of the history. Well, why are we saying differentiation is dead? Because it certainly is dead in what was the traditional form of how we were all told to do it for years.
Yeah, well, it's definitely evolved. And one of the reasons that I wanted to discuss this today is because we are busy planning a new Curriculum 2028 Key Stage 3 programme of study or scheme of learning. And so as part of that, we have to think about the activities that students are actually undertaking. And of course, you've got all the classic things in there, like objective-led lessons and, activities should be an opportunity to learn something and evidence in that learning and all the rest of it. And that's fine. But of course, part of the process is to think about the nature of the activities that the students are doing. And we've decided that we are essentially going to have an activity that all students do, regardless of their data, regardless of their previous learning experiences, etc. There is going to be an activity the teacher introduces, all the students in the class do the same activity, and then there's a reflection and discussion phase where we tease out the learning afterwards. And this is quite a bold move in a sense, because I know that there are going to be a lot of teachers out there that are going to look at that and say, well, where's your differentiation? And that's because we were sort of trained quite a long time ago to think about differentiation in terms of differentiation by task. And although we could kind of go on about all the different forms of differentiation that exist, really, we're just focusing on this idea of differentiation by task and differentiation by support today, although there are others that we could consider, as I've said. But it's quite bold because I reckon that will be some of the kickback that we'll get. And one of the things that I find quite challenging, Craig, is that teachers quite often say to me, where's this? Where's that? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? That isn't suitable for my school. That's not suitable for my learners. And I have to keep saying, yeah, but the profession's moved on. Some of those ideas that you thought were sacrosanct and you thought, we had to do things in a particular way, it's just not the case anymore. What you need to do is take a step back, reflect on what was it we were trying to achieve by doing it that way, and did it actually achieve its objectives? And if it didn't, let's be brave and say maybe there's an alternative way, and not just keep perpetuating the same methods that we were taught years and years ago. So let's have a chat about those things from years and years and years ago, Craig. So how were you taught to differentiate your lessons?
Right, I was going to say, yeah. So let's get into what was possibly the classic way of differentiating. And I remember doing this. It was the idea of, well, of course, all students don't learn at the same ability, and some tasks will simply be too hard and too challenging for some students, and then the low ability will simply disengage. So you dumb everything down? Well, no, because then the higher ability will be bored. Well, there's only one answer then, isn't there? We create different versions of the same task for different students. We put students in effectively these loose boxes or groupings, and we produce tasks which are fit for purpose. They'll stretch the higher ability, and then maybe most are in the middle, and they'll do something, and then sort of the students with special educational needs or low ability, we'll give them a much easier task. So they get a sense of achievement. And you know what? Even as I'm saying it now, I can see myself back in the lecture going, oh, this is gold. Of course, it makes perfect sense. And we lapped it up as a nation, didn't we? Yes, we did, to the point where we had different coloured worksheets producing 3 times the amount of work on teachers' workload. And let's not go into that. I mean, and much of this is about helping teachers, because if the teachers don't have time, the students get the learning. But at the end of the day, it wasn't the right approach for the students either. Because, of course, what we ended up doing is we effectively were capping students' ability. We were saying, you are never able to do this. You won't be able to access this. This is the limit of what I expect from you. And it's really, I'd say, in the last, well, this isn't super recent. I mean, the last decade, really, the shift has changed. And I know if you follow this channel and you know anything about Dave, you know he loves his reading and his research, and since he's got out of teaching, he has more time than ever to get into it. So I'm sure you're going to mention a certain book and professor and research. But it's important for me to say here, this isn't just Craig and Dave's, oh, they're out of touch with the classroom now, look at them preaching. This is backed by evidence and research. There is a fundamental shift. This is not simply coming from Dave and I. This is not a case of this is another resource provider out of touch. And before I hand back to Dave, I should say the new Key Stage 3 scheme of learning that we are writing for Curriculum 2028, we are very aware that every year goes by as another year we're not in front of students every day. And we commit that we don't want to become that resource provider where you look at them and go, well, when was the last time they were in front of students? We have been trialling for months our units in comprehensive secondary schools. We've now developed 5-6 units, and we're about to spread that out to 2 more schools. One's a grammar school, one's a private school. So we are looking at the full range of student abilities and school types and getting genuine feedback from real students in classes. And we're going into those schools and watching those lessons with those students. So, we are very conscious to make sure that we apply differentiation in a modern, sensible way that helps the teachers with their workload, but ultimately is best for the students. And that is no longer differentiation by task. So I'll leave it there. Otherwise, I could waffle on for ages and start taking your points. We could both talk about this for an hour without letting the other one talk. So if that's not the way anymore, because it's limiting students, Dave, it's telling them the maximum they should achieve, it's increasing teachers' workload, but we've already acknowledged differentiation is dead, is not actually true. What's the evolution? What's the new way of thinking?
Yeah, the new way of thinking is really that all students can rise to the challenge. And it's this idea that you provide differentiation by support. So the teacher is the differentiator, not the activity. All students can do the same activity, and it should be a challenging activity that leads towards learning the objectives of the lesson. But as a teacher, the amount of scaffolding that you give to students by going around assisting them or challenging them with higher order questions, or however you make the task easier or you make the task harder through support so that students are able to make progress, learn and engage. That's really what it's about. You've got to be careful, of course, that you don't immediately think that because it's a challenging task and students look like they're not really engaging and getting on with it, that somehow that is a problem with the task and you need to immediately jump in as a teacher provide the scaffolding, and essentially make the task significantly easier. That's a mistake. And I think one of the things that we're beginning to really appreciate in the profession at the moment is it's okay to be stuck. Being stuck is a good place to be, because that's when we learn. And
Yeah.
it's important for students to appreciate that not always are there instant answers, not always is there instant help. Not always is the task going to be easy. And it's really important that students are taught to embrace that kind of feeling, that feeling of it's a bit unsettling, being a bit stuck, not quite knowing the answer, not quite knowing what to do next. And of course, it's very difficult for you as a teacher, because you see it as your job to impart knowledge, to teach them, to enable them to make progress. So you naturally want to step in. You naturally want to immediately put the scaffold in place so that students can make progress very quickly. And the reason for that, of course, is over the years, we've been told by our senior leaders and Ofsted and, the great and good, that it's all about pace, pace, pace. And it's
Yeah.
all about making sure that by the end of the lesson, a student can do something they couldn't do before the lesson. And we've got to be able to measure that and articulate it. And so there was this drive for lessons, individual lessons, to be the opportunity to learn. And this idea that you might learn a little bit more slowly over a greater period of time, that it might take many lessons to establish a concept rather than a single lesson. This is all new and revolutionary thinking, which is a bit odd because, of course, years and years and years ago, before the differentiation drive, that's where we were, with this idea that learning is a slow process and that we need to take our time, that we need to let students struggle. Let students struggle. And we've really got to kind of, as teachers, not dive in immediately with this scaffolding. But it's difficult because when you're being observed and the students are, they feel a little bit uneasy, you feel a little bit uneasy, and you feel like you have to impress the observer. Well, now I find it much more impressive if I'm observing lessons, if the teacher has put the challenge in that makes the students have to think, that makes them have to pause, that they don't immediately get to that answer, And I'm now looking for those situations in lessons where the teacher is so confident in what they're doing that it results in students having a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I couldn't agree more. And we alluded to once that this isn't obviously just Dave and I spouting this from some kind of unrealistic soapbox. This is quite a shift, but it's worth mentioning that, I mean, at a policy level, at a Department for Education level, I believe the word differentiation has all but been stripped. They now refer to it as something learning, adaptive learning.
Yeah.
Adaptive teaching. Sorry, yes, adaptive teaching. So, there is that shift there. And of course, I've alluded to it already, but I mean, if you haven't come across it already, Dave's mentioned it on a number of books. There's a great book out there, which is a culmination of research called High Performance Learning. And you'll find an awful lot of SLT are now waving this about. You may well have had inset days where an initiative has come out of this book. But it's a real nice synthesis, and it really summarizes the shift in what we're saying in this video. I can't remember who the book's by. Dave, you're going to tell me instantly.
Yeah, it's Professor Deborah Eyre. And actually, before I forget, because you did say, oh, I'm sure Dave's going to mention books and literature and research and all the rest of it, and I kind of forgot. So yeah, Professor Deborah Eyre, High Performance Learning. You can pick that up in a second. The other thing I wanted to mention, though, before it left my mind, was way back in the 1960s, this book, Pygmalion in the Classroom, which was all about a self-fulfilling prophecy. This idea that if you think learners aren't up to a task, then they won't be up to the task. And it just fulfills these low expectations of students. And so I'm really surprised we went down this road with differentiation, given that research in the 1960s.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and that self-fulfilling prophecy is something that really is, true. And it can be reinforced by the teacher when you differentiate task, and then of course the student reinforces it themselves. Well, I can't do it. Well, I could never do that. So obviously the student's reinforcing this self-fulfilling prophecy as I can't do it, it's too hard. You're then reinforcing it as a teacher and perpetuating, that, oh, it's too hard, I can't do it, by differentiating my task. Well, you have the red task. I mean, obviously no teacher would say this, but basically you're saying, well, you go to the dumb table. No. Oh, gee, none of us would, but that's essentially where what we're saying. And of course, what high performance learning is effectively saying is we're changing the whole shift from, it's not a case of, I can't do that. It's a case of, well, I can't do that yet. No, that's okay. No problem. And I'm going to help you get there. It's the same task for everyone, because at the end of the day, let's face it, when we get to GCSE or A level, beyond, be careful here because I think not as well as the other subjects, beyond, I think, maths, which I still maybe has 2 tiers of papers, I think every other subject, it's the same paper. You cannot sit a lower grade paper that caps out at a 5 or whatever it is. I think maths still do have the 2 tiers of papers. But beyond that, everyone's going to sit the same exam, so everyone's going to get the same style of questions, and everyone has the potential to achieve the highest grade. So start now with well, no, you can't do that yet, but that's okay. We're going to get you there. And as Dave said, not jumping in too early with scaffolding, but being ready to then provide that level of support. And of course, scaffolding can come in so many ways and shapes, because one criticism I'm literally thinking about now, well, hang on, you said you're saving my workload because I'm no longer differentiating by task. I don't have to produce 3 different versions of each task, but you've just said I have to prepare for all sorts of levels of scaffolding. So my workload's still the same, isn't it? Because I'm preparing all sorts of different forms of scaffolding for different students. What would you say to combat that, Dave? Oh, shaking your head already. So Gail, what would you say about that?
You don't need to plan for this. And maybe,
Yeah.
Inexperienced teachers that are new into the profession are going to find this more challenging. I don't dispute that. But you don't need to plan anything. The differentiation by support, yes, you could have, little knowledge organizers, or you could have, activity starters, or, little bits of help on the side that might be on a sheet of paper, possibly. But I personally don't think any of that is necessary. I tend not to bother with all that myself. And I just, make sure, firstly, that the task is accessible, that there is no barrier to entry, right? Everyone should be able
Yeah.
to do something and feel some success without any real support, okay? But then as the task develops, and maybe it does get a little bit more challenging, or it evolves in different ways, then you as a teacher can go round, and it's really easy to spot those students that aren't on task, right? And they're not on task because they're stuck most of the time. They don't quite
Yeah.
know what to do, or they can't get themselves over the next hurdle, or whatever it happens to be. So I'm just really alert in my classroom to who's engaging and who's not engaging, and why. And sometimes, of course, it can be those at the upper end that are not engaging because the task is a little bit too easy, and they need challenging in different ways. They don't need a different task. They just need to have some higher order thinking injected. So I might go over to
Yeah.
them and say, right, okay, I can see what you've done here. But I want you to think about this, and what about that, and tell me about this. And it is a way in which that they can then improve what they're doing. Equally, the student that is really struggling because they think the task isn't suitable for them, even though it really is, then it's a question of going over to them and, giving them the confidence to take the next step. And I might say to them, well, if I was doing this task, I might think about this, or I might start here, or something you might want to consider is this, and not giving them the answer, but giving them enough to kind of get going. And it's about establishing high expectations. We've had a whole
Yeah.
episode on high expectations. It's this idea of knowing the students are going to do what you tell them to do. And if you
Yeah.
exert that confidence onto them, if
Yeah.
you have that aura about you as a teacher in the classroom, that you expect the students will be doing what you've asked
Yeah.
them to do, then they will. And it's very easy then to kind of go around and then just provide in real time, no real
Yeah.
planning, just the scaffolding that is required to enable students to access the task and take the next step. So,
Yeah. And challenge,
so
sorry, just say, and challenging constantly, I was going to say, Dave, negative language with supportive language and being consistent so that you challenge every I can't do it with I can't do it yet,
yeah,
but we're going to give it a go. We're going to get there. I'm going to help you get there. You don't accept I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it yet, which, was a real shift, wasn't it, with the high performance learning, this whole idea of it's a not yet attitude, not a, oh, I can't, therefore I'm going to create a dumbed down task that caps your learning.
So confessions box, because I do like to reminisce a bit, as you know, Craig.
You do.
I'm just thinking back to, this all came about, this idea of differentiation and, all must, most should, some might. It kind of came out of the era of the national strategies.
Yeah.
And this was a time of life with levels. Okay. We often, I haven't heard this phrase for a long time now, life after levels, because originally students were assessed at Key Stage 3 in levels. And that all disappeared around sort of 2015. And we talked about, life after levels. And that's the era that we're living in now, where there is no national assessment framework, and schools can assess students however they like. But back in the day, there were levels, and students were supposed to be assessed against these national standards. So if you were a level 5 in one school, then it was the same as being a level 5 in another school, because each of these levels essentially had certain, traits and standards. I forgot what I would really call them now, but success criteria, for want of a better term. Anyway, so these levels went all the way from sort of level 1 to level 8. And the descriptor for level 8, that's probably the word. The descriptor for level 8 was something very, very nebulous. But what we used to do at Key Stage 3 is you used to say, well, students at the lower end would be typically level 4. They could be level 3, but you would associate that really with primary school. Level 5, level 6, and at the very top end it would be level 7, and level 8 was just kind of you descended from the heavens. It was unachievable, really. It was so nebulous. It didn't mean very much. So what I used to do is I used to pitch my activities at kind of level 5, because that was sort of seen as about the average. And then, so I'd have level 4 activities, level 5 activities, level 6 activities, and then a kind of stretch activity for level 7 that might have only been for 1 or 2 students in the class. And it was, this idea of they get into whatever we're learning, and I have 3 versions of this activity, and they pitch in depending on how well they got on with previous units and tasks. So if they were, by the data, a level 5 student, then they would do a level 5 task. But I always kind of felt really uncomfortable with that for the reasons that we've said. It's glass ceilings, it's putting learners in a box, it's judging them by ability. I was never a big fan, but I knew I had to do it because it was the expectation from the senior leaders.
Yeah.
So I kind of used to set it up so that it was very easy to drift from a level 4 into a level 5 into a level 6 activity. So I would try and kind of get the students, if they were pitching in at level 5, to then be like, okay, but you were level 5 last time. Let's kind of get through those level 5 aspects, and I want you to push on to the level 6. And the level 6 activity kind of built on the level 5 activity. It was quite a lot of careful crafting with these activities to make sure that level 6 activity could stand alone for those students that are pitching in at level 6 immediately, but it was sufficiently available for those at level 5 to get into the level 6. And it just took hours and hours and hours of planning to kind of get there. And then in the end, the conclusion is like, nah, let's just let's just all do the level 6, level 7 activity and try and get there through my support. Come on then, Craig. What did it look like in your classroom?
Oh, don't. You're all over the place at our school. We had initiatives left, right, and centre. I mean, I had so many different coloured bits of paper at one point, not to mention then obviously the different colours of paper for obviously, students who needed different coloured papers for various learning requirements and need, and then 3 different coloured tasks for your lower, middle, and upper own, and then your almost sum, and all will do this. And then you say you have all these level descriptors as well, which were then, for us back then, stuck on every single book as well. And of course, what would happen? I saw Key Stage 3 once a week. We saw them once a week. So what happened when it got to the next report? Let's just be honest. And any teacher who is being honest, what did we do? Oh, I'm sorry, we didn't just have levels, did we? No. Each level had 3 sub-levels, because what you want in a bunch of nebulous descriptors that you can't match to students that you don't see very regularly anyway is 3 various sub-levels within it. So we had a 5A and a 5C, and no SLT wanted the levels to go down, and you knew you'd be asked if they went down. So on the next report, you looked at the level you gave them, and you put them up a sub-level. That's what happened, Dave.
That's exactly what happened, Craig.
And the students went up like that. Good. SLT were happy. You were happy.
Linear progression.
Yeah, you were happy. SLT were happy. I tell you what isn't happy is the actual genuine learning that's going on for students and the workload that you've created yourself. I mean, I would just be repeating a lot of what you said if I went into that in detail. So, I mean, I couldn't be more glad that idea was gone. And there is one other thing I want to touch on that you said earlier. Because there are some very simple things you can do. Like when I turned around and said, oh, well, a teacher might come back with, well, hang on, you've said you'll reduce my workload by, I don't have to differentiate by making multiple tasks, but you're saying I just need to scaffold up. So I need to provide lots of different types of scaffolding and extra maybe worksheets and things there. And of course, you were very keen and shaking your head. Dave's idea was, well, we can scaffold up for every student just by being there and being engaged. And yes, there's a lot of that. And teachers, yes, you should be active, where we're keen believers in students learning through doing and not being at the front. What that means is while they're doing, you're not just sat at your computer twiddling your fingers and looking at the next holiday you can book. You're in there and amongst the class, you're answering. But I do acknowledge the fact, and this is where I'm going, Dave, I do acknowledge the fact that there is only one of you and 30 students. And there are simple things you can do, though, to provide that scaffolding. So I don't think it is quite as simple, Dave, as when you said, well, you don't actually have to do anything with scaffolding. You can do, but they can be really simple things. They can be low effort things, as simple as sentence starters. Sentence starters. Well, the higher students, I'm getting into it now. So, that some students don't need the sentence starters, but what can be scaffolding? Well, just here's a few sentence starters to get in the right direction, and you can then remove the scaffolding. So there are things you can do. One thing I'm quite keen of, and that the evidence has actually shown this research, is worked examples. So if you've got a problem you want students to do, in your head's like, why haven't they produced that work? Well, you never showed them what a good work looked like. I don't mind putting effort into doing a worked example, a model answer, and even sharing it, not to say leaving it on the board, because they'll just copy it. But so we're going to do this. This is ideally something like this is what you're aiming at. That little thing there is enough to concrete. Well, I see where I'm going. I might not be able to get there, but I can get 5 steps there. So I'm not saying there's nothing you do. Scaffolding, that there is some simple things, but I think they're low effort for high reward, I think is where I'm going.
And you're absolutely right. And this is obviously Rosenshine's principles as well, providing models.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would say to teachers, do the work you expect the students to do. And then you have a model, and you can, as Craig says, you can talk about it at the beginning so they know what they're aiming for. So they're not just kind of starting blind and they don't know what the expectation is. But as Craig says, you can take that then off the board, replace back with the success criteria. And then you can bring that model back out when you're supporting individuals, at their workstations, and say, right, let's compare your work to my work. What do you notice about this? And get them to articulate, oh, yeah, okay, well, you've done this and I've done that. And right. So that's one area that you might want to look at to improve your work. So you're absolutely right, Craig. I mean, I kind of took for granted that I've already got some of those model answers
I just
because
thought it
it's
was worth
something you
saying.
naturally create as part of the planning process. So I didn't really consider
Yeah.
that. I was
And
trying
that's,
to avoid teachers creating endless
yes.
worksheets because that's not what we want.
No, absolutely. And essentially what we're talking about there is modeling success.
Yeah.
You model what success looks like. You share that with the students. They have a clear vision of where it's going. And then you can use that as part of your conversations and support as you're going around. It doesn't need to stay on the board because you're right. A lot of students, let's face it, if you can take the easy option in life, you'll do it. I mean, we do those as adults. If you leave the model answer on the board, a lot will just copy it. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't model success. So, yes, there are some things that you can do as part of scaffolding, but they can be quite simple. Sentence starters. Dave mentioned knowledge organizers, maybe towards the end of a unit. Modeling what a finished, ideal exemplar answer would look like. Things like this, and we exemplify that in some of the units we're producing. Just to come back to Key Stage 3. With some of the slightly trickier tasks, where we thought, is this task too hard to access? Have we just pitched this too high and we've gone into a classroom, a real classroom, we've tested it, we've seen it. We haven't then thrown away the activity. We've stuck with the high performance mindset and we go, right, but what we'll do is we'll adapt the task and we'll add there's all sorts of things we've done, but we'll add hint boxes and we'll challenge the students. Have a go at this task. Your challenge, try it without looking at any of the hint tasks. Okay, right, now I'm going to go around. I don't see anyone touching a hint task. I've really just not got. I can tell you what, remove hint number 1. Ooh, that's enough to set me off in the right direction. So that sort of thing. We've designed the one task, but maybe with some hidden hint boxes, some suggestions. In English, as I said, that might become sort of sentence starters or ways of extending a paragraph to further your line of reasoning. Take that full stop off, put a comma and put because, things like that. There are lots of simple things you can do. Dave, we've already been talking about this for half an hour. We could really talk about this for ages. Is there anything really key, some key message you feel we haven't touched on yet? Because there's a lot in here.
No, I think that's probably enough for now on the topic of differentiation. I'm sure it's going to be something that we return to because it's a kernel of education. So we'll probably revisit
Ever
it.
evolving.
I think my final concluding message is, if you're looking for differentiation by task in Craig and Dave resources, you're going to be really disappointed. It's not something we believe in. And it's not something we believe in because the evidence and research in modern contemporary pedagogy has said that it's not the most effective approach. And so we don't do it. So sorry, you're not going to get different worksheets and different activities for different groups of learners. They all do the same activity. You provide the scaffolding.
Perfect. Well, there you are. Differentiation isn't dead. It's just evolved. We don't dumb down. We scaffold up. There you go. Well, more from this from me and Dave next week on another At the Chalkface. Thanks for now, everyone. Bye-bye.